Hey guys, Kevin with Lifestyle Overland here, coming to you with a maintenance video for the 5th Gen 4Runner. Today, we're going to be replacing the front wheel bearings.
Step 1. Safety first. So begin by placing the vehicle in solid jack stands on a solid, level work surface. It's also a good time to get your safety glasses and gloves out as well. Remember, you are ultimately responsible for making sure this job gets done with all your fingers and toes intact.
Okay, so with the 4Runner jacked up and stabilized, one of the first things that you can do is just spin the tire to see if you hear any roaring. You might hear this at 25, 30 miles an hour when you're driving on the road. Our bearings, even after 131,000 miles, surprisingly still sound just fine. But we're at that point and we want to be prepared ahead of time and not be fixing a failure on the side of the trail. So the other thing that you can do is you can actually check your movement from top like this. Now, my upper control arms, the ball joints there, or the unit balls, are actually shot. So I'm getting a little extra slop, and I'm not sure if that's the bearing itself or just the upper control arms. So we're going to go ahead and start removing this and get ready to replace the front wheel bearings.
Next, you guessed it, we're going to remove the wheels and begin the wheel bearing removal process.
All right, now that we've got the wheels taken off, we're going to go ahead and start disassembling the front rotors. Alright, so using a 17mm socket, we're going to take these two bolts loose, which will remove the caliper from the spindle. Whew.
Removing the brake calipers can be a bit of a challenge. You may have to try several different methods to break the bolts free. Ultimately, we needed more leverage. A breaker bar would have been the best tool for this, but we were working what we had in our travel tool set.
Sometimes you have to resort to alternative methods.
Before completely removing the caliper, make sure the brake line retainers are removed, and have a bungee strap, stiff wire, or even an additional jack stand nearby to support the caliper. Make sure you support the caliper in a way that will not leave any tension on the brake lines or ABS wire.
Alright, now that we've got our brake caliper off, I'm going to go ahead and remove the disc itself. There's a little trick, especially if yours have been on for a while, using this 12mm bolt that we just removed from the brake line. We're going to insert this into the threaded holes, and that's going to push that away from the actual mount. Now, depending on how dirty this disc has actually gotten, you might have a lot of rust and gunk built up in there. So take your time, clean it out, maybe use some penetrant or something like that to kind of get all the rust and stuff out of the way so that this bolt can work for you.
The bolt from the bracket turned out to have some thread issues, so we grabbed the 2 spare M8 bolts from our hardware kit instead. Using 2 bolts helps to pull the rotor off in an even pattern. Next, repeat the same steps on the opposite side of the vehicle.
All right, so now that we have our disc removed, we're going to go ahead and start working on removing this front bearing. Now, it's highly recommended that you use a PB blaster or some type of rust penetrant ahead of time, just to make removing the assembly much easier. All right, so we're going to go ahead and remove the wheel bearing assembly here by loosening these 4 17mm bolts. Hopefully it's going to come off relatively easy, but my hopes are not very high at this point. All right, that wasn't too bad. Not bad at all. Alright, looks like the PB blaster has made this job easy. Okay, so we're going to loosen these 4 bolts just as far as we can. They're not going to come all the way out, but it's going to give us plenty of wiggle room to start working this assembly loose. Alright, that should do it. I'm going to go ahead and knock this cover loose as well, because we want to take the axle nut off. Right, so the one thing I don't have in my kit is a cold chisel, so I'm just going to use this old beater screwdriver that's been around the farm for a while and pop this loose. Hopefully. Alright. Just using some needle nose here, I'm going to work this cotter pin loose. Alright, then we're going to remove the castle nut. Alright, now using a 35mm impact, we're going to take the axle nut loose. Alright, now we're ready to remove the bearing assembly the rest of the way.
Use a cold chisel or some similar tool to drive between the backing plate and the wheel bearing. This is the most difficult part of the process, so take your time and work the bearing bolts loose as you break the unit free. You may find that the axle shaft will stick in the splines, so a good soaking of the PB blaster will help break this free. If you do need to break the axle free, be very careful when hitting it with a hammer to not damage the threads or drive it too far into the front differential. This could damage the seals at the case or the spindle. With the left side complete, let's move on to the right and show you the process again. Oh, and if you're ready for the next step, you can always jump ahead or back from the timestamps in the video description.
Now that we have the old bearing assemblies removed, we're going to start doing the reassembly of the brand new unit. Now, I've gone with a company called Blue Pit Bearings. They actually make full assemblies. Otherwise, we would have to take this to a machine shop or have a press and pull the unit apart to replace the bearings. This is more of a turnkey method, and so since we don't have access to a press, and not to mention the time and frustration that it takes to go down that path, we opted to go with a ready-to-go assembly from Blue Pit Bearings. So let's go a little bit more into detail on why I chose this particular setup. Alright guys, so when we made the decision to replace the front wheel bearings at 131,000 miles, based on our experiences with our rear bearings up in Alaska, Started doing some research, and there's a lot of options out there ranging in price from $180 upwards to $500 for a pair. As I dug deeper into it, obviously you get what you pay for. And if you're going to invest money in your rig, me personally, I'm going to invest it in the running gear, the thing that's keeping the wheels on and the vehicle upright on the road. If you want to scrimp somewhere else, that's not a big deal. I want the best in my running gear. I want the best bearings. I want the best brakes. I want all those pieces working for me to keep me and my family safe. And so I came across Blue Pit Bearings. Now, Blue Pit Bearings, they are a company dedicated to building bearing assemblies for modern Toyota vehicles. That's the only thing that they build. That's what they focus on. And they build them with Koyo, Japanese, OEM, top grade bearings. It also uses TZK hub assemblies. The other awesome part about this particular company is they offer a 1-year unlimited mile warranty on these. A lot of the other companies have a lot less than that. So you can do a bit of research and make the decision on whether or not you want to buy a pre-built assembly. They are more expensive, but when I started adding up how much time it was going to take, and the fact I was probably going to have to go buy a press or take it to a machine shop, quickly turned out that this was going to be the most efficient process for me to get this thing back on the road. This is our only vehicle, and so it's got to be up and running as fast as possible. So Blue Pit Bearings is what we went with. Let's get it installed.
The installation process is simply the reverse of removal. Just make sure you clean the area thoroughly before putting it back into place. Make sure you install your backing plate with the cutout for the calipers towards the rear of the vehicle. For off-road applications, you may decide to remove these backing plates, which will reduce the likelihood of gravel and mud getting trapped against your rotor. For now, we opted to leave ours installed. When tightening the mounting bolts, make sure you torque them to the factory specs. This will require a torque wrench and a special extender or crow's foot to reach behind the flange. With the wheel bearing assembly installed, now reinstall the axle nut to the factory torque specs. Next, install the axle nut retainer and a fresh cotter pin. Now, we opted to do a complete brake job while performing this maintenance, so we're installing fresh, genuine Toyota brake rotors and pads during the reassembly. You can see a how-to on brake replacement in an upcoming video that will appear in the upper right-hand corner of your screen once uploaded. Again, once your rotors are reinstalled, ensure you torque the two mounting bolts to the proper factory specs. Now, let's move to the other side and walk through the steps one more time. Alright folks, that about wraps up this little how-to video. I hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it informative, and I hope it helped you learn a bit more about your own vehicle, which will save you a ton of money in the long run and help you troubleshoot issues on the trail. Stay tuned to this channel for other how-tos just like this, as well as our Adventure Series videos from our travels across North America and beyond. Remember to torque those bolts to the right specs, keep the shiny side up, and we'll see you again on the next video. Safe travels.